Hey, everybody, and welcome to Notes from the Underground. This is a podcast for people who love Jesus but have some real questions for Christianity. Here at Notes, we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people using a progressive theological lens and a socio-historical approach to studying the Bible. So if that sounds like you, come on in and have a seat. But buckle up, it might get bumpy. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Notes from the Underground. This is a podcast where we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people. I'm your host, Tiziana, Mom So Hard Severse.
How you momming so hard?
I spent 4 hours in the emergency room on Monday with my toddler. I'm momming so hard. I earned my first emergency room with your kid merit badge.
Really?
Yeah. She cracked her chin and needed a stitch. So. Yeah, so we spent a good amount of time.
You did it.
Yeah, I earned my merit badge. To my right, I've got Rick the Podfather Welch.
Toe Jam. It's Toe Jam now.
Rick Toe Jam Welch.
Rick Toe Jam Welch?
Yes. Don't you remember? Toe Jam.
She was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
Richard Toe Welch.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
I like Podfather better anyway.
I like Podfather better, yeah. And as always, behind the glass, we have Rocket Man Andy Bishop.
Cacao.
All right.
Cacao. I can't do it as high pitch as Rick, as Carter can do it.
I know.
He can be like high pitch.
Yeah, he's good.
We should get like a little soundbite of it, just to like throw it in. Yeah, just to throw it in.
I don't have it. I ain't got
Maybe
it.
use it as the piano sound to substitute the fucks. You know? Wouldn't that be great?
Mother!
Yep. No, that sounds hilarious.
That's good,
That's an idea. Well, so what we're doing today is we are wrapping up our study on astrology. For a quick recap, we spent a good part of the first episode talking about the background of the book of Daniel, sort of reconstructing constructing an argument regarding some Jewish religious practices that we have some archaeological evidence for, including, the Qumran caves, Dead Sea Scrolls. Got that right.
Yep.
We had the Brontology, which is like the zodiac of the face and like what it meant, and like the zodiac calendar and all that stuff. And then, of course, the synagogues we've excavated that had the zodiac on the floorboards.
Yep.
We talked about Job. We did not forget to mention that astrologers are also like getting a big fat thumbs down in Deuteronomy. And that's what we did for episode 2. We spent a lot of time looking into like other texts besides Daniel. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to just kind of like wrap it all up, right? So we spent the last 2 episodes kind of like creating this argument that there are lots of verses and lots of archaeological evidences that ancient Jewish practices weren't necessarily anti-astrology. So how do we get to where Christians are like, absolutely not? Mm-hmm. So in order to sort of like have that discussion now, we have to talk about Christianity. So we're going to have to go do that thing that we do, which is kind of recreate the social conditions of a first century Rome. And then the other thing that we're going to have to look at is the rise of Christianity during Constantine and after, as sort of like a state-sponsored affair. Mm-hmm. Okay. Does that sound good? Does that sound good, Andy? You on board?
It sounds great.
Yeah. So these are the 2 events. And so for the first thing, we're going to go back to that birth narrative in Matthew. So let's just talk about this. There are 4 gospels, right? When we see a nativity scene, we see a star, we see angels, we see wise men and Mary and the baby in a manger. All right.
Animals.
That is that, and the animals and the shepherds, right? So that's an amalgam of 2 stories. Mm-hmm. Okay. Some of that comes from Luke and some of that comes from Matthew. And we kind of like coalesce them into one story where they fill in each other's gaps. So Matthew is really the only version that has the Magi that show up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Mark and John don't even bother. They just jump right in with Jesus' baptism by John the Baptist.
Yeah, straight into the adult time.
Yeah, like they're like,
Luke
we don't
Matthew
know what happened
dig,
before
but-
he was 30 and we don't care.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Not important.
Right.
But Matthew
Who
did
gives a
see the
F?
importance of it. Matthew saw
did.
a big importance in his birth.
Well, and here's the kicker. Not only did Matthew see the importance in that whole entire narrative, the point, because Matthew's audience were the Jews.
Yeah.
That's who he was writing the story for. It was for Messianic Jews. It was to tell his own people, tell the Jewish people about the Messiah. Because I don't know if we know exactly who wrote Matthew, so I don't want to call him a Jew if I don't know. So that's why he starts his narrative the way he does, with this giant genealogy From Noah to so-and-so, from Abraham to David, from David to such and such, 14 generations here, 14 generations here. He is setting up the Jewish lineage to prove Jesus' Jewish heritage. And then throughout the whole book of Matthew, he's constantly quoting scripture, constantly saying, so that this scripture will be fulfilled. He's really hammering it home that this is for a Jewish audience, and he's trying to tell them this was your Messiah, okay? So what was going on in first century Rome? Okay, so first off, these people were like mad obsessed with fate. All right, ancient Romans, their whole entire religious construct was about fate and discerning the fates of the gods. Now, we are familiar with religion. We like to say, "Oh, what's your religion?" And there's an answer. I'm a Christian. I'm a Buddhist or whatever, which is not a religion, but I'm Hindu. I am
Zoroastrian.
I'm Muslim. And generally, these religions that we know of, they have these things. They have like these creeds, these ways of behaving, these kind of liturgies. But it wasn't like that in ancient times, especially in ancient Rome. I remember when I took my first class in undergrad. I love when I say shit like, when I took my first class in undergrad. It was at a community college.
She's kind of like a process theologian.
It was at a community college. Okay, so before y'all think I'm putting on too many airs, the first class I ever took in like world history, we had this really interesting discussion about the way that Rome, instead of demanding that their conquered peoples, worshipped their gods, they were like, oh, the more the merrier. What's his name? Right? Who's that?
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this before, their gods were attached to the land. So the general idea about quote unquote religion wasn't this solidified thing with a liturgy and a text and a group of people and rules that we do and all this stuff. It was a much broader, wider thing. They had
there's societies still like Japanese societies that the ones that they'll worship Christianity and
yes, I know what you're talking about.
It's not Shinto.
But
Taoism?
No,
that's
but
Chinese.
It's,
sorry.
It's Christianity, but they also still follow their traditional Japanese religion, and they are wildly mutually exclusive. They don't make sense together. Doesn't matter. They can hold those two things. They can hold those two things and believe in them both, and they move forward with life.
Yeah. Well, you got to think about it. So you're talking about people. They have these gods. They get conquered. Obviously, the conquering gods are more powerful. So we're going to worship these gods now. And sometimes they would worship both. Sometimes they would take their old gods with them. But it's like, when you move into a new town, you want to find out who the mayor and the city council is. There's a different set of people in charge in a new town than in your old town. And that's basically how people navigated, right? There was a general idea that there was maybe possibly one giant supreme being, but there was all these lesser gods and these lesser deities and all these other people that still had power. There was like a triangle.
I said this a long time ago, but
right?
I feel like monotheism was invented around the time of late Jew, early New Testament. Monotheism was not the rule.
No, it wasn't.
It's a relatively recent invention.
But it's just like an interesting construct. So in ancient Roman in Rome, in the Greco-Roman world, you were constantly, can you imagine walking on a very narrow path and you're constantly not trying to piss off all these gods that have all gotten crammed into one place? And you might have your favorites, if you were a female, maybe Athena was your favorite, or if you were a birthing mother, maybe, whatever was your favorite. You had these gods that you tended to hope that person fought for you the most, but it didn't necessarily mean they were the all powerful. It's just, the one that you liked the best or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the ancient world, they were not caught up about the afterlife. In a lot of our spiritual practices now, we talk a lot about heaven, a lot of what's going to happen when we die. And a lot of what we're doing now is trying to be sure of our salvation when we die, because we're going on to this better place. That's not how that's not how they functioned. Their goal was to try and live now, right? They wanted the here and now to be good. I got this really interesting, I'm going to read a Bart Ehrman quote. I read it today. I thought it was great. Because he says, many people in the modern world are motivated in their religious communities by a belief in the afterlife. The view would have made little sense to most people in the ancient world. For most ancient persons, religion was not the way to guarantee an afterlife. It was the way to secure life in the here and now. For the majority of people in the ancient world, life was constantly lived on the edge. There was nothing like modern medicine to prevent and cure disease. A tooth abscess would frequently prove fatal. There was no modern surgical methods and only primitive forms of anesthesia. Women often died in childbirth, and simple operations could be hellish. There were no modern methods of agriculture and limited possibilities for irrigation. A minor drought one year could lead to a poor village's starvation the next. There were no modern modes of transportation, more stuff that we all know about how terrible it was. And of course, they also experienced all the anxieties of personal relations that we all know today. Ancient people knew the tragedy of losing a child or a friend, fear for personal safety, and unrequited love. In a world that is helpless against the elements, the gods play a major role. They supply rain for the crops, fertility for the animals, children for the family. They bring victory in war and prosperity and peace. They heal the sick and comfort the downtrodden. They provide security and hope and love. These things beyond the control of mere mortals, they can only come from the gods.
Yeah, wow. It makes sense now when you think about it, because they're like, oh, they worship the fertility god.
Yeah,
well,
totally.
Of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, they wanted kids.
They wanted kids, or they wanted food, or they wanted to win war and to survive.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, that's funny. That's so simple, and I think obvious, but it's just like a sentence that has not been said out loud to me.
Yeah, and but that's one of the things at Bart Ehrman. So in this environment, right? This is the environment, the cultural environment. This astrology, I read several papers. One of the papers said astrology was merely part of the furniture of ancient Rome. It was a part of everyday life. People didn't breastfeed, it's like, okay, let me read this. They were obsessed with all kinds of prognosticating, not just astrology, okay? So, you know the term if the auspices are good, good auspices or whatever?
Yes.
That was because there was these guys in ancient Rome whose job was to watch these birds called augurs fly and determine the will of the gods by how these birds flew, right? They had vrontology, which was like the study of thunder and what the sound of thunder meant for your life. They had seismologia, obviously, understanding tremors and earthquakes, and what that might have to do with anything.
Wow.
It factored into even the most mundane of decisions, like when your child was going to start school, when you should hunt, when to end breastfeeding, which is, you know what, I'm not consoling anybody.
Basically, everybody was doing Groundhog Day, but it was all the different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The prognosticator of prognosticators, the little groundhog, and we do it every year on the 2nd, right? I mean, none of us believe it, but
yeah. So in this life that was kind of driven by this kind of like fear that fate was already decided, and you were just sitting here trying to figure out what it was, and you're constantly trying to please this absolute multiplicity of gods, right? Not only the ones that maybe came from your heritage, but these new ones that you're just running into. You're like, it was like this constant state of not making a single step without asking someone's opinion, without consulting the fates. It wasn't just like the gods, it was your fate, consulting the stars for your fate.
I think it's interesting to consider a society of humans that understands on a much more base level than we do how little control they actually have over their own lives. Yeah. And that's still true. It's just we have, a couple more medicines and better running water, and we've managed to convince ourselves that that's not true, but it's absolutely still true. You still have so little control over so many things.
Right.
And maybe it's just societal. It's probably at least partially societal, but we absolutely act like we are our own gods or whatever. And it's ridiculous. Like you control barely anything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So let's keep that all in mind as we tiptoe back to the book of Matthew and the Magi. It was Daniel, the book of Daniel, where we talk about the Magi from the East, and that they had been taught by a Jewish astrologer, Daniel, the Magi in the Persian court, which is who eventually became the Magi in the book of Matthew. All right. So in chapter 2, we know that this whole thing happened during the time of King Herod, right? So that was 37 BCE to 4 BCE, right around that time, right? So this is why scholars will put the birth of Jesus sometime in there, 6 BCE to 4 BCE, because Herod died in 4 BCE, and he said, kill all the babies that were maybe 2 years old.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we get that from. So at this point, Judea in general is occupied by Rome, and its ruler is Caesar Augustus, who was the ruler from 31 BCE to 14 CE. Big chunk. So when Jesus is born, and living the majority of his life, this person's in charge.
Yeah,
right?
until he becomes a teenager.
Right. Now, Now remember, Caesar Augustus is the dude that comes right after Julius Caesar, who was like a total douchebag, right? Like he's the one that took Rome from being this thriving democracy to being like a dictatorship, right? So here's the deal. This part to me is just bananas. So I got this from two places. There's this guy, Suetonius, who wrote two ancient biographies on Augustus, whose name was originally Octavius. So some of it comes from that, and then some of it comes from this podcast that I listened to that I had talked about before. It's called the Astrology Podcast, and I can link it in the show notes if you're interested. It was this huge thing. So a lot of this comes from listening to reading those two pieces. So here's the deal. Julius Caesar's a jerk, and he's living his life. And he has his great nephew is Octavius, and he loves him and thinks he's great and kind of adopts him as his son. And he eventually is murdered at some point, and Augustus buries him with this like giant to-do. And there's like these giant games and this whole thing. So Suetonius says at some point in the 11th hour of these games, this comet appears overhead and it lasts for 7 days. Now, again, these people are obsessed with fate. They're obsessed with how thunder determines the will of the gods, right? So big friggin' comet that just appears during this guy's burial honors normally would be a bad sign. As a general rule, comets were like a big thumbs down. Yeah. But for whatever reason, the story gets spun and we have no idea how much Octavius/Augustus plays in this, because it's obviously when someone's going to write his biography, they're favorable to him. So we don't know. But at some point they decide, no. It's not a bad sign. It's a good sign. As a matter of fact, it's the soul of Julius Caesar soaring over us.
Yep.
And now he's been deified.
Yep. He's
because
a god.
Again, in this world of gods and lesser gods and demigods and all this other stuff, kings and people with power were often in that pyramid. They considered them gods, right? But he was like sort of like posthumously deified in this way. So Augustus goes and has a star put over the statue of Caesar. And now, of course, we all know he doesn't become the emperor directly, right? Because he has Mark Antony and this other guy and like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
Mark Antony like bails on, he marries Octavius' sister and then he like leaves her for Cleopatra and it's this whole drama. Yep. So eventually Octavius and his general Agrippa, they torch everybody, and now he's in charge.
Yeah, they wipe out Mark Antony.
They wipe out Mark Antony, and now he's in charge.
And Cleopatra commits suicide.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is all going down. So it's 31 BCE, Augustus comes to power, and he does this crazy thing. He starts minting all these coins with himself and Caesar on it together with the star, being like, I am the son of God and am born under this star, this like magical star. And he starts doing this as this way to sort of like justify all the murdering, right? Because you know there's a lot of murdering when you're trying to be in charge.
Yeah. I want to mint my own coins that declare my own deity.
It's crazy.
That story's starting to sound very familiar, though.
Right. Right.
True. Yeah.
So I'm going to read this directly, this thing, because it says, so Augustus also began to use iconographic images of a cosmic kind to proclaim Julius's godhead and to associate himself closely with his deified father. A great statue of Julius Caesar stood in the forum, and at Augustus's order, a star was placed over the statue's head. We also possess a number of coins that feature this, and the Citius Ilium, or Star of Julius. Some of these coins also show the profiles of the two Caesars together, deified father and living adoptive son. So then he does this thing. And this comes from Suetonius. So this is all going on. Augustus is, Julius is dead. He's still sharing the world with Mark Antony. So this is from Suetonius. And so he narrates these events that take place right after Julius's assassination. In his retirement at Apollonia, which is a Greek colony in Illyria. So in his retirement at Apollonia, Augustus went with his friend Agrippa to visit Theogenes, the astrologer, in his gallery on the roof. Agrippa, who first consulted the fates, right?
Right.
Had great and almost incredible things to predict of him. Augustus, therefore, did not wish to make his own nativity known and persisted for some time in the refusal from a mixture of shame and fear, lest his own fate should be predicted as inferior to that of Agrippa. Bullshit. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Pull the other leg. Maybe you'll get some money. I just like, he's so humble.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's already been snatched up by Julius Caesar and made his adoptive son and given this place of power. This happens in 44 BCE, right after Julius dies. He's already pretty blessed.
Yeah.
All right. But anyway, whatever.
I want to be adopted by an all-powerful monarch.
You have to keep this in mind.
What do you think the odds are?
Oh, Lord.
I mean, you'll have to go to England.
Yeah.
That's not an all-powerful monarch.
Go to North Korea.
They live well, though.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah,
North Korea has an all-powerful
another
monarch.
deified.
Yep, absolutely.
Ruler, right?
Yeah.
Not really. That's just another Rocket Man.
He's a Rocket Man.
Remember?
That's
Trump
cute.
called him Rocket Man.
Yeah,
That's
Rocket
really
Man.
Yeah. So
And
anyhow,
Rocket Man,
okay.
Andy Bishop
So
I didn't.
Now you
put
see
that
the
together.
correlation.
Totally missed that.
Yeah, there was the correlation. Sorry.
All right. Sorry. That was a deep cut. All right. So when Augustus had been persuaded, however, after much importunity to declare his nativity, Theogenes started up from his seat and paid him adoration. Not long afterwards, Augustus was so confident of the greatness of his destiny that he published his horoscope and stuck a silver coin bearing the image of the Capricorn, the sign under which he was born, which is not true. He's a Leo, but so they think maybe it was a rising sign. There was some, because we know your birth chart isn't just like your sun sign. It's all of this stuff, which we discussed with Jessica when she was here recently.
Right,
We know it's
and
more
different
complicated
people
than
in
that.
different times.
Right, we know it's much more
find
complicated.
different things
as
important.
significant, right? Yeah. In our time, we think the sun sign's important. These people didn't, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, probably. But we don't know the exact time he was born, so we can't calculate his exact birth chart. So you see what I'm saying here? Julius dies. He throws this big to-do. There's this comet saying he's the son of God. Oh, and now he also just so happens to have gone to an astrologer who's consulted the fates. The inexorable path you are on without your consent etched in the stars. And it just so happens to say also, like, you're totally going to be the ruler.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does he do? He publishes his birth chart. Which was a common thing. Because again, astrology, part of the furniture. These people didn't freaking stop breastfeeding until they checked the charts. Okay. This is like goes all the way back to episode 1. I'm not going to cut my hair until I look in the Farmer's Almanac. Right? These people don't make a step unless they're sure that the fates are telling them this is what because these people's cosmology was such that it's like they believed that the heavens and the earth were like a reflection of one another. And so what was happening up there was like being reflected down here. And so what you see down here, that's like the relationship between the two. Yeah. And so that's like their cosmology. It's different from ours, which is that God made all of it, right? But like there's this like
But there's still the same idea with the will, like in the template of prayer where he says, as in heaven, so on earth.
Well, yeah.
But that's just the will. But you're talking about something.
I'm talking about fates, yeah. Fates, and like the way that your life is determined. Yes. It's like cause and effect. You can't undo it.
That's right. Uh-huh.
So people would do things like that. They would like use their birth chart as a way to justify, right? And there's this other quote. So I read this one book by this guy, Timothy Hedges. I didn't read the whole thing because it was like 468 pages, but I read a good chunk of it. And his whole book is on first century Christianity and their problems with it, with astrology. And I got to find this one quote because I thought it was really great. He says, and keep in mind that the profession of astrologer no doubt included learned and sophisticated practitioners as well as insincere charlatans. Right? I think that's a Hedges quote. That's a Hedges quote. So it's like you could have your dime store fortune teller or you could have an astrologer like Daniel.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it all got lumped under astrology.
Yeah.
That's it.
It all
right?
coalesced into this little mess.
It all
here.
did, yeah. And vrontology and ectopacy and all these other ways that we're like desperately trying.
Seismology.
What's the one?
Seismologia.
They touch your head?
No. Ectopacy is when they look at the entrails of a sacrificed animal to like make sure it was a acceptable sacrifice.
I was thinking of I think it's phrenology.
No, phrenology is the head one, yeah. Deciding, yeah. So this is the thing, right? So this is the environment. Mm-hmm. You've got this king who is saying his right to rule is because he is the son of this deified God with a star that proclaimed this beautiful and blessed situation, and then publishes his birth chart, his astrological birth chart, as a justification for this, right?
Yeah.
So along comes Matthew, and he's got this whole narrative. So this is a political statement. It's like because one of the primary themes throughout Matthew is the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
And its juxtaposition against the kingdom of earth. Kingdom of heaven and kingdom of earth. So there's this really strong political case here to be made about why Matthew would include the wise men and the story of the star. Because first of all, the Magi had roots all the way back in Daniel. And so he would have been using astrology as like, his Jewish audience would have been like, oh, that's funny. I think.
Oh, okay.
You know, they would have been like, they would have understood that what Matthew was doing.
Yeah.
And by the way, keep in mind, the Magi are never maligned or called bad guys or demonized in any way.
The Jehovah's Witnesses think that they're demonized.
Oh, really?
They do. Oh. They actually think that it was wrong.
There you go.
What they did was wrong. Yep.
Okay, well,
but us Baptists think it's all good. We like to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. But I mean, it's like it's like this juxtaposition, you know?
But it sounds more like a political statement than an actual fact.
It does sound like a political statement to me.
He's trying to say we're bigger than Rome.
To me, and also like, and again, it's still that same old conversation. My dad's bigger than your dad.
Yeah.
My dad could beat up your dad. He's saying the true creator of the heavens and the earth, the one who really gives us the signs in the heavens that tell us who is who, those are the signs that we're following. That's the God we're following. And that God also used a star to tell us who our king is.
Yes.
And he used astrologers to find it. And what's interesting is like, this podcast I was listening to, obviously I don't know a whole lot about the technicalities of astrology. Jessica like showed us a book. Y'all didn't see it. But she had this big giant book of like tables and math calculations. It's not just like people are like pooping in a dish and then looking at it to figure out what's going on. It's very, you know what I mean? It's actually like super mathematic and it's very particular. And they, you know, it's a whole sciencey thing or pseudoscience. You can call it that. I don't care. But like, I don't know anything about the language of astrology because it's big. But apparently in the Greek, that word Anatole, when they say his sign is rising, that's actually like your rising. It's like the word for an astrological term that you know. It's like your rising sign. So like it actually uses an astrological term to describe the star. Yeah. Not an astronomical one, but an astrological one. A certain thing that determines a certain position in your birth chart or a certain thing or whatever. That's the word they used in the original Greek.
Yeah.
So even if you were reading it in Greek, it has these super, you know, it has very astrological overtones, not even undertones, but overtones, which I think also are an interesting political statement on the part of Matthew. But it's funny because Matthew's not trashing astrology as BS. No. He's also using astrology, but he's using it to demonstrate the power and the will of God.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I think, anyhow. Yeah, and like,
I'm curious, are you gonna touch on Moses at all, or are you just gonna stick with Daniel from here?
Well, I'm super done with that whole piece. Now I just want to talk about the history of Christianity and its rise and its fight with paganism, starting with Constantine.
Is it okay if I just read one verse?
Yeah, dude.
So all the way back in Numbers, when Moses, you know, or at least the book of Moses called Numbers, in chapter 24, verse 17. A lot of people think that he is pulling the 14 generations from Daniel because of the timing of Messiah.
Yeah.
Okay. But who Messiah is and the star that represents him was long before Daniel. So it says, chapter 24, verse 17, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Sheth. So he's going into this, the words of God say that there's going to be this star that comes out of Jacob.
Yeah.
And then a scepter out of Israel. We already know that the scepter was given to Judah and that Christ was from the tribe of Judah. So like there's all kinds of Jewish mystical writing long before even Daniel gets into it. But it seems to be all coming from the same language there.
I had a Messianic Jewish fellow that I was talking to about this say, well, yeah, and there's also a lot of conversation about how the 12 tribes of Israel are supposed to be the 12 signs of the zodiac.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Right.
I've seen that.
You know, and so this is my whole thing with Matthew and with the Magi. The Magi are actually the good guys because when Herod's like, oh, I want to worship the new king. Yeah, no, you don't. You're right. You want to 86 that kid. You know it. So they like scoodle-a-dood away so that he doesn't know exactly the location of the kid, because they think they probably thought they were coming to meet Herod's son, because he was the king of the Jews at the time, quote unquote. So they're probably like, oh, you had a kid? He's the king of the Jews? We saw his star. We saw the rising sign of his birth chart in the east.
Yeah.
Where he at? And there he was like, oh, you didn't know so now?
What's Jesus'
And then the Magi were like, wait, what?
Do we know?
What's Jesus's? We don't know, because we don't know when he was
exactly
born.
when he was born. Yeah.
September 11th.
Well, and that's what I was saying. Yeah. He says September 11th. But the thing is also, there's
that makes him what, a Sag?
People. No, that's a Virgo.
Virgo.
Yeah. So people that have.
He was the son of a virgin.
Saying. Virgo. Interesting. Yeah. But there's actually been lots of different people that used genuine astronomical occurrences that were happening in and around 6 BCE to 4 BCE. Like there was this convergence of 3 planets that happened at a certain
Jupiter
time.
in retrograde, they called it. Yeah. And it looks like
one giant star.
Yeah. Coming from Persia to going westward, young man, all the way to Jerusalem, they would have followed that Jupiter in retrograde or whatever. Huh. And then it disappears at some point and then it reappears in there. And they believe that was because of the sky, like everything like clouded it. The great cloud clouded it. And then it appeared when it was time and they were near. Anyway.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it. There is a lot to it.
Johannes Kepler had an idea, great astronomer. He said there was like a certain planet that was doing a certain thing at a certain time. I mean, there were a lot of astrological omens in that period of time that if we knew what they meant astrologically, we might could use those to back
to date.
Calculate.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure they definitely do that anytime they can. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you'd have to find, see, that's the thing, because there's such beef now between astrology and Christianity, you'd have to find somebody who gave 2 Fs about the two of them in the same room,
Yeah.
And that's, as somebody who's got the skill set too. And I read this one book by this lady who did a bunch of that kind of for she tried to calculate the birth chart of David and stuff using some different astrological things that happened. It was really interesting. And she kind of suggested that Samuel was probably an astrologer too, or had some knowledge of astrology. And that's why when he looked at the suns, the podcast that I listened to, let me see if I can scroll down to the bottom and I can link it if you guys care. It was the Astrology Podcast with Chris Brennan, episode 226. It was released in 2019, and the guest was Nate Craddock. He's a licensed astrologer and Christian priest with a degree in divinity.
Licensed? A licensed astrologer?
Look,
how
brother,
does that work?
I just ripped that from the show notes. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm
I'm sure they have a governing body that assembled themselves and
charlatans.
Yeah,
I didn't say that.
You got to weed out the charlatans.
Yeah, so you got to get them licensed.
You got to weed out the charlatans. Yeah, but so 2/3 of this mess that I've talked about with Matthew and the story of old boy and the star and the coins and whatnot came from that. Yeah. And then I went and looked up some other sources to sort of verify it and get a second opinion. And then, so that's where most of that came from.
I've read some of this before.
Yeah,
about the comet that came and, it was normally it would be an omen, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was spun. And I've read that.
It was totally spun. Yeah. And again, it's the Magi, it's they're not listed as bad guys. They're listed as part of God's plan.
Yeah.
Okay. But now we have beef. So why do we have beef? So we have to fast forward to Constantine's reign. Mm-hmm. Right. And
why do you have beef? I was just going to say there's only one reason why there would be beef, is if you leave God out of the picture. If you turn it into just the stars and leave God out of the picture, that seems would be an issue, because the Magi knew of a promised son of God. That's what they were coming for.
Right.
And that's something obviously that Daniel had passed down from generation. So I think if it's far removed from the God of the Bible, that's why people get all bent out of shape. Yeah. That's my opinion.
And here's the deal. So when Christianity was kind of doing its thing, it sort of set itself up as a thorn in the Roman emperor's side, the empire, because again, part of the whole deal of this entire ancient Greco-Roman world's religious and spiritual structure is worshiping lots of gods, because there's all kinds of gods with power, and you want to placate all of them and sacrifice to whomever makes sense to you, but absolutely 100% definitely to the emperor, because he's the only living God that you see living in your world, right? Mm-hmm. And the Christians were absolutely not.
Well, no, and you had said earlier in this, you were talking about how in these ancient cultures that the gods were over the land.
Yes.
Right?
And they controlled the land.
And so that's what makes Christianity unique, is because Christ takes it from the land and he becomes the land. He is the new Israel.
Yeah.
Right? So he carries it into the logos. He's the logos of the Greek culture where they're looking up like in that ethereal spiritual plane. He's lifting the land up into the heavenlies. That's where he is, and we are with him.
Can you hit me with the definition of logos, please?
Yeah, so logos means the word. When we say in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God, that was a Greek term. Okay. Logos was kind of like the essence. That's what it means, the essence, like the essence of life. And so Christ, they took that word from the Greeks and said, Christ is the logos.
Okay.
Just like they said, Matthew said Christ was born under the star.
Yeah,
they're taking all of
these
things around and they're saying, no, Christ is the one.
Yeah. And see, and that's the thing, right? Like, if you ever stop and think about it, and this is something that they said on the podcast that I thought was freaking awesome. If you think about the way that everybody's lives were like completely and utterly ruled by these emperors who were gods, who were handed to them by the gods, who were often absolutely shit.
Yeah.
You know, this idea that your life is no longer determined by these people, that your fate is no longer etched in the stars and determined through this, desperate searching, that you actually have your citizenship is in a different kingdom.
Yes.
Your citizenship is in a different realm. You aren't actually beholden to or held down by any of this nonsense right here.
Right.
You have something so much more. That was actually like incredibly appealing to people.
And that's where
that's one of the reasons why Christianity was like spreading as fast and as far as it did.
One of the things that Jesus said, you are in the world, but you're not of the world. So that is appealing because we're in this mess, but our home is not of this place. So we can be a part of what's going on.
The next time somebody claims to be a deity around me, I'm going to check and see if they're ticklish.
All right.
Okay.
I don't know. It just seems like if somebody claims to be a deity, if they're ticklish, it would be very difficult to take them seriously.
Does the reverse then become true? If someone's not ticklish, they could potentially be a deity. I want my husband to hear this because I'm not ticklish and he's very ticklish.
Ooh, I'm going to say yes then.
You're an incredible deity.
I'm going to say yes then.
I'm a goddess.
Yeah.
I'm a goddess.
He already knew that.
She's a domestic goddess.
I just was imagining somebody tickling Augustus Caesar, and I was like, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But if you stop and think about this world and everything that's going on, I want you to stop and think now about the political and spiritual implications of being born again.
Yeah.
You are no longer bound by whatever signs or whatever you think you were born under. Mm-hmm. Those things don't determine your fate. Those things don't tell you what you can and can't do and who you can and can't be. Yeah. You can let all that go.
Your citizenship changes.
Yeah, everything changes. Yep. And for people who were like...
of course, you still better pay your taxes to Rome.
Right.
That's right.
Right. So what starts happening is big old beef.
Sure.
There are lots of Roman rulers before Constantine that are like, these guys suck.
Yeah.
They're like messing with our whole system. We're scared because they're not offering us and they're not worshiping our gods. They're not placating them. They're going to come get us. We got to tell these guys to knock off their nonsense. And the beef with Christians wasn't that they were worshiping their own God. They didn't really even give a F about that. Mm-hmm. It's that they wouldn't worship theirs too.
Yes.
That was the big problem. That was the political statement.
You had to do both.
That was the issue.
Or pay homage to them. You got to understand they had temples to all these other gods.
Sure.
And you had to make donations to these other gods.
Oh, so you didn't really need to. It was just another tax then.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
It really was. And that's... Look, I heard a comedian, Jim Jeffries. You ever heard of him? I think he's...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He said, I think he's from Australia, and he said...
He's pretty big, though.
He said the Roman Empire did not collapse. Everybody says, the Roman Empire collapsed. He said it didn't. He said it became the church.
Yes.
That's what it did. He said all the empire did was switch to church, and your taxes became indulgences and donations that were demanded donations. So it's the same thing. It's just it went from being this political empire to being more of a church empire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in 306 to 337, this is the reign of Constantine.
Okay.
Looking at this chronology from The Story of Christianity, Volume 1, The Early Church to the Dawn of the Reformation, which I highly recommend everybody read. So Constantine has this like experience, right? With
the cross.
And he's like, oh my gosh, this Jesus guy, maybe he's the real deal. And so he makes everybody fight with the sign of the cross.
And his mother was a Christian.
Right. His mother's a Christian.
Yeah.
So he like goes on this deal and like gets power and all this stuff, cool stuff, whatever. He wins. And he gets into charge and he's like, okay, well, so maybe Christianity's not that bad after all. We're going to give it a pass.
Yeah.
I'm going to give their God a pass. And he like starts lifting all of the restrictions. And they had a really bad period of oppression right before that. That's why I said this one time on the podcast, like how wild it must have been for these guys, like down in the dungeons, these Christians that have been locked up by the previous emperor, like shaking out into like golems.
Into the sunlight.
Into the sunlight, and Constantine's like, oh, here, come tell me about your God. They're like, this is a prank.
Yeah, you're going to kill me, aren't
yeah,
you?
like this is bad news, right? Because there wasn't like a lot of favor. You know, so he like starts like saying, okay, maybe these guys are chill after all. Maybe it's all good. But see, Constantine did not make Christianity the state religion.
We heard that from Dr. Smith.
Yeah, and he never actually denounced paganism, and he didn't even get baptized until he was on his deathbed. So Constantine was like, he probably did have a very real experience with Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
sure, but he did what Romans do, which was hedge his bets. And just add Jesus to the pantheon.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know this for sure, right? Nobody knows. And there are some people that like, there are some biographers, Christian biographers that are like, Constantine is like, the one that saved us. But hey, he kind of didn't.
Yeah. He did sponsor councils and things like that.
Absolutely.
So that they could get together and discuss their religion and things, which it's a state-sponsored. It's like having a faith-based initiative today.
Yeah. But he never did make it the state-sponsored religion. So that didn't happen until 50 years later with the Edict of Thessalonica. And because he also continued to participate in pagan rituals, he remained the official pagan high priest throughout his reign, which I also said during Dr. Smith's episode. And, so he kind of was playing for both teams. So this is why when Timothy Hedges is writing his book about first century Christianity and beef with astrology, he says, in many ways, astrology represented a religious rival to Christianity in Greco-Roman society. Astrology also had authoritative sacred writings, and certain astrologers were regarded as religious professionals in their own right. One of the traditional terms for astrologers, magi, originally referred to a priestly caste of ancient Persians, and the term is still carried exotic sacerdotal connotations in the Greco-Roman world, right? So there was beef between these two religions that had these different ways of navigating, and the pagan religion over here on the right, astrology was like a big part of their deal. And so along come Constantine, and he's like, Christianity's not so bad. You know, we're cool. We can be chill. Can't we all just get along? Okay. And then but see, Constantine dies in 337. There's a couple of emperors in between there, all right? And then we have Julian the Apostate, who ascends the throne in 361, all right? Julian, not a fan of Christianity. And he works really hard to reestablish paganism and astrology along with it. I read this other paper in the early Byzantine Empire and astrology, and it's called, there's like 7 people that authored this paper. And they all have like these wild names. It was because it's from like the European Journal of Science and Theology. So like, whatever. I'm not going to say it. I read a paper. I'm not going to repeat all their weird ass names that I can't say. So they said Julian's admiration for the ancient Greek civilization led him to an effort to replace Christian religion with the ancient Greco-Romans as the state's official faith. So during his reign, he stopped state subsidies towards the church. He removed Christians from upper public offices in the empire and positions of philosophy. He removed positions of philosophy teachers with the justification that it was unfit for people who did not believe in the Gentile gods to teach and to interpret the works of Gentile authors. Wow, doesn't that sound interesting?
Mm.
Isn't that a weird political statement that we should probably pay attention to? He started taking Christians out of the ability to teach because he was like, this is not, you don't know anything about these Gentiles, so you get out of here. Maybe we should think about that when we're telling other people that because they don't believe what we believe, they don't have a right to have a particular position. So, all right. I'm like trying to read and talk at the same time because I have ADD. I keep losing my spot. Right. So he moves Christians from the upper offices. He removes them from teaching positions. From this edict was excluded the teacher Prophesius, however. because he refused to accept the special treatment anyways, because he was like Julius's teacher. Julius had a Christian teacher. So he excluded his teacher from this, but the teacher refused to accept and resigned in 362, which I kind of think is a little bit badass. Yeah. So in addition, with the edict of February 4th, 362, Julian reestablished that Gentile worship, imposing the reopening of the temples of the Gentiles that had been closed and restarting of the sacrifices on the altar. Julian, with his actions, aimed to utterly vanish the new religion, and he knew that these actions would bring divisions in the church so that the divided church would not represent a major threat anymore to paganism. Now we've got real beef.
Right.
Now there's a big-ass divorce, and astrology is the little kid in the middle being like, who are you going to choose, mommy or daddy?
Right.
Right? You have, during this time, the Council of Laodicea, which is like a big synod, right? Where they all get together, and 33 or 34 bishops and people get together. This is when they sit down and they're like...
Synod?
Yeah.
Synod.
Yeah.
It's an assembly.
S-Y-O-D. S-Y-O-N-O-D, yeah. It sounds like snot rocket to me. Like every time I hear snot, I think of like a snot rock. It's like a word for snot rocket. But anyway, it's like, the Bible doesn't tell you how to tie your shoes. So sometimes people have to get together and figure these things out, right? So they have these snods. And they had one. And
An assembly of the clergy and sometimes also the laity in a diocese or other division of a particular church.
Yeah. So the Council of Laodicea, I think it was shortly after Constantine's reign. You want to Google the Council of Laodicea and tell me when that happened?
I sure will.
Yeah.
I would, but I'd have to go back to school to learn to spell it.
Yeah, so they have they would be like, it's like they have it divided like 1, 2, 3, 4. I think they're called canons. Canon 1, Canon 2. I can't remember.
363 to 664, 364, and Laodicea, Phrygia, Pakatanyana.
Yeah.
However you say it. Yep.
It's in 362 that Julian's doing this.
Yeah.
Right? So then the Christians get together and read number 39. Council of Laodicea, canon number 39. Let's read it, everybody.
Okay. Canon number 39. The council marks the first occasion in Christianity of the explicit condemnation of astrology.
Yep.
A matter on which theologians and legislators had not yet reached consensus.
So what year again?
364?
364.
Yep.
To 365, because it took a minute. They didn't just like have an afternoon chat. They took a while to hammer out the details. There's a bunch of weird stuff in there, like how widows should behave and, who can,
they started damning books.
Everybody always slipped
the
pork
minutia.
in.
Right. Yeah. 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 Everybody slips pot in. Is that what you said?
Pork.
Oh.
Everybody slips the pork in.
Yeah. The pork
that was
barrel.
also a callback.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
but
to
you know what I'm
another
saying?
episode.
So now there's real beef.
Yeah.
And
Pork.
so, right. But so it's also during Julius's reign that his emissary to the Oracle of Delphi is reported to have received the oracle. Tell the king everything has collapsed. Apollo has no roof over his head anymore. Neither foretelling bay leaf nor speaking spring, the speaking water has also dried. This oracle, either uttered by Pythia, or more probably being a creation of tradition, expresses an indisputable truth. The ancient religion was vanishing, and along with it, its famous sanctuary of Apollo was also perishing. It seems that the Olympian gods had decided to retreat from the stage of history and to silence themselves. Their allocated time in history has passed. So after Julian's reign, it's like 2 Caesars later that the Edict of Thessalonica officially demolishes paganism and like outlaws it. Let's read it. I like to read it now because I'm sick of getting in trouble, for fuck's sake.
Did you get in trouble again?
No, but I haven't gotten in trouble since. But
She
I'm
gets
just
in trouble with
so
herself.
sick of it. Yeah, you can keep pianoing out my F words probably. It's probably for smarts.
Or
but,
cacao it.
Yeah, or cacao it, yeah. But like I'm so sick of just getting in here and like popping off and then going away and being like, wait a second. So I'm just going to start making sure that I read directly from the texts.
If you happen on a cacao, there's a couple right at the top of episodes. Let me know if you happen into one.
I'll
and
tell you
go
where they
cut
are
it.
and you can pull them out.
Yeah, because the cacao would be pretty funny.
It would be.
Okay. Christianity and paganism. So this is on page 141 of Justo Gonzalez's book. All right. Christianity and paganism were generally on equal footing before the state, both allowed and both supported by it. It was in the last years of the reign of Emperor Gratian, which was 375 to 383, who had called on Theodotus, 379 to 345, to share his rule. That decisive measures were taken to place paganism at a disadvantage. In 382, Gratian decreed an end to government financial support for paganism and its priests, and also ordered that the altar to the goddess Victory be removed from the Senate house. In 391, Theodosius outlawed pagan sacrifices and ordered the temples closed or devoted to public use. In 392, all pagan worship, private as well as public, was forbidden. Yet the greatest threat to the ancient religion was the manner in which overzealous bishops and mobs took these decrees as license to use force against paganism. Even before the time of Constantine, some fanatical Christians used violence against pagan worship, as attested by the Council of Elvira in Spain in 305, whose 16th canon orders that if any are killed as a result of having destroyed idols, they should not be counted among the martyrs. So we had a new world order.
That's right.
And as part of that, there was this outlying of the practices that the worshipers of these gods, that the pagan religion relied on as one of their tools for determining their fates or the wills of God.
And you can also, I would say this to the Christian people, when you hear things that state, and the Christians went and killed all of the pagans, ask yourself the question, did Jesus ever command them to do such a thing? And the answer would be no.
No.
So something is not quite right there.
No, I mean, something's not quite right. And something's not quite right. So you have to stop it. That's the thing. Jesus never said to hate anybody, I don't think.
No, that he hated the teaching of the Nicolaitans. That's the only thing that I found. Yeah.
Who in the world with them?
They were the Nicolaitans. It's in the book of Revelation.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And he didn't like their teaching.
That's another one of those books that I just don't read. Isn't that terrible? Because I just can't. My sister, if I have a question, I just ask her. She's like all about it.
She loves it.
Yeah.
Revelations is one of those books.
Her eschatology is pretty firm.
Huh?
She's got a very firm eschatology, though. Like she's got a firm eschatology, and so that's the way that.
Well, I believe it's all past.
I know.
So
I know. Yeah.
I feel like
but she's read it and studied a bunch. So if I have a question, I ask her. But it's terrible. I have this thing, if it's not going to help me figure out how to be a better person now, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm supposed to care about the afterlife and the way it all ends and all this other nonsense. Not nonsense, because I know some people are really super into it. And you know what? If that's your jam, go for it. Honestly. Yeah. Do your thing, chicken wing. I want to know how to be a better person now and how I can be God's hands on earth now.
Yeah. Those are the things
goal.
That you add to your faith. 2 Peter
Which my
1.
sister also does. That was one of the beefs that What's-His-Face had when you guys went and had the big round table.
Yeah.
He was saying how sometimes what can be so damaging about this obsession with the end of it.
Yeah.
What's the one where they all go up?
The rapture.
The rapture. And the new earth and God taking his favorites and leaving everybody to burn in hell or whatever.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with that is that people get so invested in that they forget to do anything about the here and now.
Yeah.
God,
they call it polishing brass on a sinking ship.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't, you know what? I'm going to do my best to make somebody's miserable life better as long as I'm still walking, you know?
You described the rapture like the title for an episode of The Office.
Yeah.
The one where they all go up.
Yeah.
That's how they titled all those.
Ups?
Yeah.
What's the uppy ups? You have a
Friends.
book I've got to get.
Friends.
Oh, it was Friends.
The
that
one
did that
where.
one?
Oh, yeah.
The one where.
Yeah.
The one where, yeah.
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 The one where they all go.
Yeah.
Only God's friends.
God takes his favorites and everybody else gets to burn in hell.
God's friends.
I'm glad you corrected me on that. Somebody would have been shaking their fist.
Yeah.
God's friends.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I want, you have a book. I heard you say it on the podcast, that team that wrote the book on all the different eschatologies and what they all are. I really need to read that. I really think I need to have a firmer grasp on what the different various eschatologies are.
I would love to give you that book to take with you to Washington.
That actually sounds like a pretty good book. Honestly.
I'll get you one. It's actually really good.
And Karen's
Racing with My Shadow.
Racing with My Shadow. Because I'm going to be doing a lot of reading.
I have a copy for both of you.
We rented a cabin that has no Wi-Fi.
Ah.
So yeah, we're gonna bring checkers and read books. Yeah. Well, we're going to the Pacific Northwest, right? So we're also gonna be I don't know if but that place is pretty rad.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of fun stuff to do outside of your house. So
I was just in northern Maine.
That's our deal.
And saw 2 moose. But while I was up there,
that's right.
But also the only reason they had internet is because he had Starlink. Otherwise, you're toast.
Yeah, I would have
done anything.
Yeah. So this is it to me. And in this period of time, you have all these. So what we're talking about here, Constantine rules begins in 306. The guy, it makes it officially outlaws it, shuts everything down in 392. Who do you have in there? You've got Origen in there. You've got Basil of Caesarea in there. You've got Augustine of Hippo in there. You got all these early church fathers, and their way of thinking and talking about astrology also becomes kind of like incorporated into this wicked talk, right? So I started asking myself, okay, what was their beefs? And in reality, most of their issues weren't with astronomy or even the study of the stars, but with quackery, which is now my new favorite word.
Quackery is a good word.
Quackery. So I've outlined it here. This is their basic thumbs down, okay? The argument of practical impossibility, that it's not possible to determine an exact horoscope. They're like, what? You're going to like have somebody run upstairs watching the stars, and as soon as the baby crowns, give it a ding? Or another, I think it was, so these are the three fathers that I read the most about: Origen, Basil of Caesarea, and Augustine of Hippo, right? Those are the three that were mostly talked about when it comes to like early church fathers and what they thought about stuff. One of them was like, what are you going to like, which part? Is it when the head comes out, or do you got to wait for the whole thing to come out? Do different body parts have a different astrology? Right? What's the deal?
Yeah.
It's like there was like a lot of sarcasm. Right?
Okay.
So the impracticability of that, okay? The argument of different destinies, the discrepancies that occur in the lives of people who have the same horoscope. This was Augustine's like big beef. He wrote 2 books where he talks about this the most. He might have talked about other ones, but the 2 that came up the most was Confessions and City of God. And he goes on this whole tear in City of God about twins. And like, if you have twins, you know, then they should theoretically have like the exact same horoscope. So like, wouldn't they have the exact same life? And he also has this big beef. He has this friend that talks about how his mom was pregnant with him at the same time that a slave in their home was pregnant. And so they did this test where like the women went into labor at the same time. And so they were like, they had servants in her house and servants in the slave's house. And like they sent notes to each other so that it turns out the babies were born at exactly the same time. But then how come his friend was wealthy and had everything good and wonderful, and she had a slave's life? Yeah. Like it doesn't make any sense.
This actually like puts a thing in my head that I guarantee has happened. Was like inducing labor at a particular time to get a certain astrological sign.
Oh, don't pick on me.
Did you do it?
No, but I was afraid. Okay. All right. I'm gonna tell him myself.
Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna have to be induced with Jubilee. That was the plan, and I was super upset about it because I was like, Lord, I don't know what you want. I don't know when you want this baby to be born. I don't know what you have planned for this baby, and I don't want to look at because the thing is, when Jubilee's birthday was, her moon sign changed and her sun sign, she's born on the 19th of October. It changes to Scorpio on the 21st. Mm-hmm. I love my mother-in-law. I love lots of Scorpios, but the worst boyfriend I ever had was a Scorpio. So I was in this position where I was like, am I going to choose my own like induction because I want to try and make her be Libra because I'm afraid that if I have a Scorpio, I'm going to like ruin her. Because I mean, my biggest issue is that I'm just kind of like, I can be sometimes bull in a china shop, and I hurt their feelings. I hurt Scorpio's feelings all the time. I don't mean to, but I do. And so I hurt their feelings. And so I'm like, oh God, now I'm going to have one that lives in my house. Oh no, I'm going to ruin it. I'm going to ruin it.
I've always felt that way about Pisces. I'm like, oh, they're so squishy. What do I do? And I generally like them, but they're so squishy. And I don't even believe in astrology.
Big same, right?
And yet here I am.
I know. I know. So I did this. I had this huge battle with myself because I was like, Lord, I don't actually believe that her fate is determined by her astrological chart, because we have moved away from that as Christians.
Yeah.
I believe that you created the heavens and the earth, and that you will give this baby whatever she needs to fulfill the good works that you have prepared for her in advance to do. Right? What is that? Is that Romans? The good works that he's prepared in advance for us to do? It's either Roman. I think it's Romans. Okay. I know that nothing I do or say, please don't let my fear, which is how all these other people are using astrology, please don't let my fear try to manipulate the astrological chart for my own purposes.
Yeah.
And then I went into labor, thank God.
By the way.
So I didn't have to decide.
Yeah, it's out of your hands.
But I was so upset. I was like, oh no, because I would have had her be a Libra, which is what she ended up being, only because I was terrified that I would ruin a Scorpio.
I had an astrologer. I gave him my birth date, where I lived, the time, everything, and this is what she said to me. She goes, "Oh my goodness, you were born in 75? You were born in May of 75? Wait a minute. So she started telling me that I was a Taurus and that I was a cusp and that I had my moon was somewhere. And she said, basically, you're a strong leader, but you have a heart for people."
Oh, this sounds correct.
I was like, I know. I was like,
yeah,
man,
I would not take.
That's actually pretty close.
Yeah, I wouldn't take issue with that.
That's the thing, right?
That was pretty cool.
So,
I was like, huh.
Right.
Okay.
And but see, that's the thing. That was our whole conversation with Jessica, right? Most astrology now isn't about determining what your job's going to be, or like these guys, their beef with it is it's supposed to be determining your fate, static, irrefutable. This is what's going to happen to you. But how can two people have the same fate? How can two people be born to be the president of the United States? That's your fate, versus you can be a natural born leader with a good heart, and you can be in charge of the janitorial crew at the gym.
Yeah, of course.
It
still be a leader.
Right.
And you are still a leader, and you are still functioning within the realm of what your astrological chart gave you as gifts when you were born.
Yes.
And so like that's the
yes,
thing.
we are color coding those urinal cakes.
I don't know.
Well, how else would you know when
like,
to change them?
You guys are speaking boy talk now. I don't know what you're talking about.
Urinal cakes?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just.
I know what they are, but like because I'm not responsible for urinals in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, you said janitorial service.
Well, yeah.
So I was just saying that anyway.
And this also goes back to Corinthians and Paul's whole deal with Corinthians, because you guys are trying to say that some people are better than other people and that some jobs are better than other jobs. There is absolutely no such thing. Every job in the kingdom of God is valuable. Every person in the kingdom of God is valuable.
Yep.
If you are the hand, if you give more honor to the hand, then where would the sense of smell be?
Yeah.
If everything were the eye, if everything were the hand, how would we walk around?
Yeah, it's an equal playing field.
It's an equal playing field. And so whereas in ancient times, and again, I think that's part of what Paul was having to confront and come up against, is that these people had these ideas that your birth chart and the way you were born was like sort of deterministic about your value and your fate and how the gods perceived you and favored you. And Paul's like, oh, no.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
God favors all of you exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter.
Astrological sign, yeah.
Yeah. And like Jessica was saying, it's more about, now we understand astrology, more about taking a snapshot of the heavens when you were born and determining how certain aspects, how certain planets or certain positions might influence your nature.
Yeah.
Like I listened to her one time and she was talking and she was like, someone was like, oh, I think I want to take this job. I don't know if I should take it. Should I take this job? And she was like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Your chart would never, like, that's not what we're doing here.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is, because there's like that, I think it's Mars determines your work life or Mercury, one of the two or something. And she's like, what I can tell you is you have this placement here, which means you're going to tend to like jobs that do X, Y, and Z. So if this job does that, great. If this job doesn't do that, great. And also you might still like the job. I don't know.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm just telling you what's in your chart. And I'm just telling you what I see. And then she's like, you know what? She's like, this is going to sound weird, but like, have you ever thought about being a kindergarten teacher? And she goes, my mom's a kindergarten teacher. And she's like, okay, well, because I'm seeing when I look at this stuff, this is what I'm seeing. And then it's like, and then she winds up doing this whole thing where the woman talks about more like her relationship with her mom and why that kept her from going into that career, even though it would have been a good career for her based on her chart. And so there's all these like other elements that affect what we do. It's not just the fates, which was another big old beef that the ancient early Christian fathers had, was this concept of fate. It was a moral argument for them. Because if you believe that this all-powerful fate, is determining what you do and don't do, then it suppresses any moral obligation, because morality presupposes personal responsibility. So if your life is predetermined by the planets and such, you aren't responsible for your actions, whether applaudable or reprehensible.
Yeah, of course.
Which I don't really understand how that jibes with predestination.
Well, it's just. It's an excuse people can use.
It's almost like they went backwards.
Yeah.
It's almost like theology went backwards. Because in the beginning, they were like, no, Jesus Christ frees us from this concept of fate.
Yeah.
Don't you understand? We're liberated now from this concept of fate. And then predestination and Calvinism I feel like put us right back in that same old freaking boat.
Yeah. I can see why you think that. Yeah.
That's not necessarily my expertise. That's not my area of expertise. So don't come.
Don't worry.
Don't come for me, okay?
If we only talked about areas of expertise on this show, it would be awfully quiet.
Yeah, right.
It'd be
I can tell you how to cut aluminum really well with a metal cutter. That's my area of expertise.
I can coach people through singing a song.
Yeah.
There you go.
I can tell you how to place a foil for a highlight.
She
that's
very
right.
good, very well too.
I can do hair.
Yep.
But yeah, so the other big argument was
And you make a wicked chicken and dumplings too, I think. Right?
oh yeah.
See?
I think I do. I think that's true.
Yes, I think that's true too.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard.
It's true. Maybe I should make you guys chicken and dumplings
I
next
love
time.
that idea.
I wouldn't be mad about it.
Yeah. What I really like is a chicken and dumpling stew.
Yeah.
That I make. That's really, really
I make
good.
a wicked chicken and gnocchi.
Oh, I know. That's true.
Yeah.
That is 100% true because we've had that at the Christmas parties.
The signs were aligned, man.
Yeah.
Just like Andy's soda bread.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna real quickly, yeah. Because the thing is, I think I've pretty much made my argument, but I'm just gonna finish reading these. So what Timothy Hedges did in his book is he's like, look, the relationship between Christianity and astrology is not linear.
Mm-hmm.
Things kind of moved in this different way. What I can tell you is these are the general arguments of the fathers, but I can't tell you like which one happened first because different people have different ideas. But so it's like the argument of different destinies, the argument of common destinies. So if two people born at the same time have different destinies, that's dumb. And if two people born at the exact same time have the same destiny, then the argument for identical fates occurring in the lives of people who have different horoscopes.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. So two people born in the same horoscope having different lives and two people with completely different horoscopes having the same life. Those things. And then the argument that if animals and human beings are equal and subject to astrological influences, then animals would have the same destinies as humans, which was also a thing in like having having an animal's birth chart read.
Wow.
For real. Like for real, that's what these people.
Are we
this is how severe.
Are we
this is how
going to
serious
get
it was.
lots of milk this year from Bessie?
I know.
I don't know.
I don't know. And so,
I would pay to have Greg's chart done probably before I would my own.
That's funny. That's funny. But I mean, that's the deal, right? Like
He was
quackery.
like,
quack the quackery.
when
That's
I
what
was
the early
born,
fathers
there was
had.
a comet in the sky.
Is that
Yeah.
what gave him such cute bunny feet? It was a comet that was like, this is a good omen that gives a cat bunny feet, sort of.
Sorry, we took you on
I
a
don't
side
know.
note.
No,
there.
you didn't. I don't know. I'm just. That's all out, and the same with nations. Then certain things should affect people on a national level. But Jessica talked about that too. How there's a difference between what's affecting everybody and what's affecting you individually. And then there's also the juxtaposition between how these planets and what they're affecting everybody work with what's going on with you individually. It's like quite complicated.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't tell you what to eat for breakfast. It doesn't tell you when to stop breastfeeding. It doesn't tell you what college to go to or what job you're going to get. It doesn't tell you where your life's going to end based on where you started. It just gives you a general idea. If you're feeling this certain way, it might be because like Mercury's in retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, I mean, the moon and the tides can make you feel certain ways.
The moon and the tides can make you feel certain ways. And it also might just be helpful in terms of like looking at when you are at a crossroads, you're looking for some guidance, checking out your chart and looking at certain spots might be helpful. But here's the thing, and this is the bottom line. You could live your entire life without ever knowing anything about astrology and you would be perfectly fine.
Yes.
Because you have a connection to God and to the divine, right? If you're walking around with Jesus Christ in your heart.
Or you may not.
Right.
And he can live his life any way he wants.
Right. But I'm saying like
I was talking about Greg, not you, Andy.
If you are inclined to seek the will of God at a certain juncture.
I'm a little offended. You just assume what Greg's spirituality is. He's his own man, and I don't tell him what to believe. I'm not that kind of person.
That's funny.
Sorry. I'm
No,
so
it's
sorry.
okay.
I stepped all over you to get that dumbass joke in.
No, I liked it. It's totally fun. It was a funny joke, actually. I enjoyed it. But I'm just saying, like, if you are inclined at a crossroads to seek advice and your first step is a pastor or your first step is a prayer room, you're going to get an answer. Your first step doesn't have to be your astrological chart. You don't have to factor that in at all in any way, shape, or form if that doesn't make sense to you.
Yeah.
And you're still going to live your life in a perfectly wonderful and healthy, happy fashion. I promise you, right? As long as like God is your guide, you're good,
And it doesn't change the fact that I like to open up fortune cookies because it's just fun.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you do enjoy astrology and you do think it's fascinating, interesting, and you do want to read your chart, you like those things, totally down. Be mindful that you don't fall into that trap of believing that it determines what you can and can't do and what you are and aren't supposed to do, what you aren't supposed to be. These are not fortune-telling tools. Fortune-telling tools, that's not, no. Okay? Yep. And so like I said, I myself almost fell into that trap when I was like, oh no, I have to decide what birth chart I want my daughter to have based on when I go into this. And the thing is, but my knee-jerk reaction was, oh no, Lord, I don't want to make the wrong choice. Please don't let me do this dumb thing, because but I don't think God would have let that happen anyway. Jubilee was going to be born when God wanted Jubilee to be born. But you see what I'm saying? I almost fell into that trap. Like I had control over that somehow. Mm-hmm. And I didn't. God had control over when Jubilee was born. God knew what signs he wanted Jubilee to be born under. Same with Aurora. Aurora was 6 weeks premature and she was born under an Aquarius moon. So my daughter has a Leo. This is crazy. My daughter's birthday is 8/2. And she's a Leo sun with an Aquarius moon. One of her aunts was born 2/8 and is an Aquarius sun with a Leo moon. And I said, God sent her here for you. God sent Aurora for you for some reason. There's some significance in the way and the time that God birthed this baby. I don't know what it is for you, but that one's for you. I don't know why.
So 20 years from now, whenever it happens, let's have another podcast and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting,
because
it's like
episode 3000.
So I think that's the bottom line. I mean, how, the other place, there's one more kind of like the nail in the coffin, as you would say. The nail in the coffin, there was one more. It was this Coli et Terra. I don't read friggin'.
Is it Latin?
Latin. Yeah, I don't read it. So it was another like declaration.
Yeah.
That happened in 15.
Oh, during the Reformation.
Yeah, in 15. I'll look it up. 1586 or something. So I'm gonna plug it back in because it's actually the screenshot of that I took is actually on my phone, and my phone is in another room because my phone's on a timeout for ringing in the middle of a podcast. So my phone's in timeout. Oh my Lord, you guys. It's Robert Bellamari and the Papal Bull Coli et Terrae. This is I'm on Google Scholar right now, which, by the way, if you want to start doing any kind of research on your own, start with Google Scholar. Mm-hmm. That's where you go. So 1586. It's a significant turning point in the history of the Catholic Church's censorship of astrology. They argue that this bull was intended to prohibit the idea that the stars could naturally incline humans towards future actions, but also had the effect of preventing the discussion of other forms of natural astrology, including those used for medicine, agriculture, and navigation. The bull, therefore, threatened to overturn principles established by Thomas Aquinas, which not only justified long-standing astrological practices, but also informed the Roman Inquisition's attitude toward this art. The promulgation of the bull has been attributed to the rigor of the incumbent Pope, Sixtus V. In this article, I revise our understanding of this bull in 2 ways. Anyway, I'm reading the abstract of an actual published
paper.
Was
his name Sixtus the 5th? Or the 10th?
It's the 5th.
Yeah, Sixtus the 5th.
That's fucking funny.
His name was Sixtus the 5th.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. His name is Sixtus, Sixtus.
Sixtus the 5th.
Yeah.
Why didn't they just call him 30?
But yeah, so this happens. So this isn't, yeah.
Dirty 30.
I'd have called him Dirty 30.
5 times 6. That would have been his name. That would have been his nickname, probably behind his back, because popes back then could have you murdered for no reason whatsoever.
That's
true. If you farted in their general direction, they'd be like,
they'd write a papal bull about it.
Yeah, there would be an inquisition. And they did terrible things to people. I don't know if you've ever studied the Inquisition. Awful. Absolutely awful. So 1586. Right, that was the nail in the coffin. And it was a significant turning point because at this point, astrology and astronomy got lumped into the same thing. And it kind of set us back a while in the study of the world and how things moved.
I bet you it got wrapped up into, because it wouldn't be long after that suddenly King James comes on the scene.
Yeah.
And then you've got demonology.
Yeah.
His book on demonology, which involved astrology. And then... yeah, so I think that's when it really starts kicking.
And that's when it starts to shift.
Yeah.
So it's never
the Witchfinder General and all that.
Yeah.
You remember that stuff?
It was never the work of the heavens were not the works of the devil.
Right.
The planets and the stars and their placement in the heavens, those weren't the works of the devil in the Bible. They're the works of the Lord God of Israel, right? Yeah. And the signs in the heavens that proclaim things were divinely inspired by God. It's not like they're wrong than saying that the stars foretell the will of God. But they're wrong in their application because they're saying that the relationship between the human and the divine is this like fearful, antagonistic, like you've got to please all these many gods, and that it determines your fate without any wiggle room.
Yeah.
It's like static from the moment you're born, whereas like in the Christian version of astrology, it's like, this is the stars under which, these are the gifts, these are the tools God gave you when you were born. These are the gifts for your life. These are the signs and omens that might dictate how you do and don't do certain things, So you can either like have the Lord say, hey, don't get on an airplane today, or you can look and see, Mars is in this place. It's not a great place for air travel.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Either way, God's got your back. But like, that is when it shifted from, okay, it's probably just like not a good idea. And none of the early church fathers said that.
No.
It was like quackery. The issue was the quackery. Although I think in City of God, Augustine at some point, but he had this other beef going on with the Manchurians or whatever.
Yeah.
Because Augustine came to Christianity later in life. His mom was a Christian, but his dad was a pagan. And so he sort of like went the pagan route for a period of time. So when he comes back around, his beef with astrology is also kind of wrapped up with his beef with this other way of believing. I think it's the Manchurians.
I don't know.
Oh, I'm looking at you because you got your phone. I'm like, Google's it. Use the Googles.
What do you want me to Google?
No. Who did Augustine have beef with? Yeah, like that's not going to turn up 1,000 things. All right, I got it. I got it right here. I can't remember.
It wasn't Arius because that was
no. It was these guys like this like sect, Manichaeans maybe, Manchurians.
Manchurians.
I wish I could remember. Anyway, somebody out there is screaming at their phone or their YouTube. It's the
Manichaean.
Perfect.
Oh, you were close.
Manichaean.
Manichea.
I think I got the Manchurian candidate stuck in my head.
Manichaeans.
So he had beef, because he was that for a period of time, but like it didn't line up with like what he believed in terms of like the fact that Jesus Christ sets you free and that you are now free. You are not bound by fate. You're not bound by these astrological omens. You are no longer a prisoner. You're free. And so, so he had some kind of cosmological beef with these folks. So that gets kind of, I think, brought up in the City of God, because in City of God, he kind of goes a little berserker on it. I didn't read the whole book. But for the most part, it was just quackery. It wasn't demonic and evil. But it started to kind of become that way as paganism was outlawed, as paganism was defeated in some ways as a religious practice, right? Like we don't see people sacrificing bulls and stuff to still today, do we? I mean, does anybody still do bloodletting as a form of worship, as a form of determining the wills of their gods? I don't think anybody does.
I don't know anyone.
200 years ago, they were doing bloodletting just for health reasons.
Well, and I know like you can do in like Santeria or...
What? That's what killed George Washington.
They let too much blood?
Bloodletting.
Yeah, there's offerings and stuff that you would do in like Santeria or something like that. I know some Christians out there are like pulling their hair right now because I'm talking about witchcraft, and they're like, no, I get it. I'm going to stop. But, right, like as a general rule, we don't have like temples, giant temples where people are bloodletting anymore. Like that.
No, I don't know that happens anywhere.
Right. Those days are over. So I think that, what we've discovered here in terms of the history of the church as the religious battle for world domination between the pagans and the Christians under the microscope of Greco-Roman society, right? As that battle began to wage harder and harder, I think that the polarizing of the two spiritual practices became more and more evident. And then, paganism and all of its trappings was eventually like just 100% completely outlawed. Then they just started doing dumb stuff like outlawing, herbal medicine.
Yeah. Astrology almost broke apart my marriage. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And almost tore us to Pisces.
Oh, God. It almost tore us to Pisces.
It almost tore us to Pisces.
I got it.
That was great.
Oh, man.
Perfectly timed.
For a second, I was like, oh, my God, really? Oh, my God, are you for real?
Oh, for reals.
Yeah.
That was a good study, man. That was fun.
And it's over. Stick around, folks, because our next study is going to be on near-death experiences. I'm very excited about it. I kept thinking about Billy I Candy Kimsey. Folks, if you have not listened to the Burrows of Berea podcast, I highly recommend that you do that. I love that show, and I'm a part of that show. That's Rick's show. Rick's the host over there, and Andy's over there. But we do these testimony series, and Billy always asks, what do you think happens when you die? And I've been thinking a lot about that. And I thought, well, Billy, why don't we just ask some folk who've died?
Yeah. Ask some actual front row seat people.
We got all these people speculating. Yeah. Let's ask some folk who done did the thing. So we've got some really cool interviews with some folks, and I've got some
Karen
some
said
stuff
she would
coming up.
come on and tell you her story if you want to hear it again.
I do. I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And have that be the focus of the whole episode.
Be cool.
Yeah. I'm really excited.
I'll get you a book. I'll get you your book.
So stick around, folks. We will see you next time on Notes from the Underground.
Yep. Peace out.
Bye.